So, I'm Sydney, Australia, so I hope you can all understand my accent. I'll go very slow. Or I should say, g'day mates. So you can understand. The presentation here is different to the one in the book. So it wasn't just to confuse you, it's just that was an earlier presentation, then I went away, as you do, and revamped it and everything. So this is the newer version, the newer model. We can give you copies later on. I can email them to you or put them on a stick. Ooh. Okay. Alright, now to the exciting part of the afternoon, the meat. So the main challenges for meat processors, and this is the same whether it's in Europe, America, Australia, they're all got the same sort of concerns and issues. They're trying to control their purge. They're obviously after cook yield. You want to extend your shelf life. There's reduced costs because water's becoming very expensive. Meat's becoming very expensive. Clean label. We've all heard today, everyone's after marketing numbers, and that becomes a little bit more tricky. Supermarkets, particularly in Australia, we have two supermarkets, Coles and Woolies, and they dictate the terms for our industry because they're 80% of the two supermarkets own 80% of the market. Then you have your customer demands, what they were after, which is cost of convenience, and then above all that, meat processors have to actually make a profit. So what I thought I'd do is hopefully not bore you to tears, but run you through a little bit of the science behind all this, because if you understand a little bit of that, then it's going to be a bit easier as to know how the role of Citri-Fi plays in a meat product. So, with meat products, you've obviously got your raw materials. So what is meat? Well, meat's mainly composed of water. So, what you're trying to do is hold that water in. So, we talk about water holding capacity. And if you're working in the meat game, you'll hear about this water holding capacity term quite a bit. And it's the ability for the meat to hold on to the intrinsic amount of water that's actually within its structure. That's before you even start to add more water in. So it's very dependent on the pH of the meat. So as the pH of the meat starts to slide down to 5.3, 5.6, that's when the meat will release and let go of its water. So additives, and that's where I come in because I'm an additive supplier. I thought I'd put this up, so I did this slide for another presentation whereby you've taken your basic main food ingredient ham and you look at all the raw materials that actually go into the ham to make it ham as you know it. Maybe not so much the lovely ham here in Spain, but the common garden variety ham in Australia where it's been extended to about 50 to 70%. So as you can see, you've got lots of ingredients that go in there. And there's a couple actually that I've missed off there because I couldn't fit them on the slide. But it just goes to show how many ingredients will actually go into a product before you as a consumer get that product. So functional ingredients will change the final function of the meat. Processing can't do it alone. So this is really important, particularly for you as salespeople when you're out there and you go, oh, but can't we just take this out? Can't we just add this? Why can't I just extend the processing time? Why can't I just tumble a little bit longer? It's just not going to do it, unfortunately. And why is that? Because again, you come back to your water holding capacity. So you need certain ingredients like salt and phosphate to help you shift that pH along, because when you shift the pH of your meat, then you can improve your water holding capacity. Increasing the pH of the meat, what will it do is it increases when you put the salt and phosphate into your meat, it increases the charges on the fibres of the meat. Those charges will repel each other, and therefore the water scoots in between the fibres and it's held there. So using salt and phosphate is needed within your meat to help you hold that water in. And this is not only just water that's in the meat, but water you will introduce later on. So when we talk about extensions. I put this slide in because in Australia it's very topical at the moment to take phosphates out of meat. And I think it's the same here in Europe. And everyone's talking about, oh, I want to take out phosphate and substitute it with something else. And the problem is that phosphate's a very cheap commodity style product. They do an awful lot of functionality within the meat structure, and there's some of the functions it performs. And so it's not such a simple method of taking one product out and substituting it with another product. Quite often what you have to do is use quite a few different products. And in fact, in the work that I've been doing, you end up using about 3 or 4 other products just to substitute for phosphate. So your label then goes from having STPP on it, so your typical phosphate for meat, to having 3 or 4 other ingredients on there. And your cost goes up. So from that point of view, there's no magic silver bullet. So when your customer comes to you and says, oh, I want to take phosphates out, we go, yes, that's fine. But the reality of it is, you're going to have a product that might not be stabilised, that might have less water holding capacity, the preservative action will be reduced. So, and there's no one single product that will cover everything that phosphates do. If there were, we'd be selling it and making lots of money. So now we come into the manufacturing side of things. And what we'll see in a minute is injection. So obviously you hear people that talk about injection. When you talk to your customers, they'll either have an injector or they'll have a tumbler or they'll have both. So the work that I've done, which I'll show fairly shortly, will be based on both, because some of the smaller processes only have a tumbler. Why? Because it's cheap and easy. The injectors, I'm not sure what they cost here, but you're looking at 100,000 and upwards for a really good quality injector. There's quite a few Chinese injectors out which are a lot cheaper, and they're still good quality. So what an injector does, simple. It has a lot of needles, injects into the muscle of the meat, and you have a brine system, which has got ingredients in there, and it's distributed and basically shot out within the meat structure. What that does is it means that the meat can then hold up that water, and you've taken a 10 kilo piece of meat, put in 30% water, and now you've got a 130 kilo piece of meat, or 13 kilos piece of meat. And then you have tumblers. Tumblers are necessary if you're trying to extract your your protein systems. Packaging. Packaging is also a very valuable tool within the industry to retain and hold on the water within the meat structure, because as you'll see, the impermeable casings, which are the plastic casings up the top there, that means that basically everything's held within that casing, and so you get 100% yield. Because I'll come back to the fact that meat processors are all after about yield, because the more yield you can give them, the more money they've made. So the thing is too that you've got to be careful with the ingredients you're supplying to make sure that when you do use those plastic casings, that the water's held there and it doesn't all bubble out, and so you end up with this great big piece of meat surrounded by a lot of water bubbled up in this plastic casing, which can happen. So why is water holding capacity important? Why do I keep coming back to it all the time? Well, basically, from a consumer point of view, that's what gives you your succulence. So if you know yourself, if you taste something and it's all dry and gristly, you're not going to want to go back for more. So if it's soft and it's got texture and it's succulent, you're going to return back to it. And we'll actually have some chicken pieces, which we did yesterday, little pieces of chicken that you can taste to see the difference. The processor, all he cares about, again, is yield. He's just after profit. So the more water he can put in there, the more he can hold in there, the more money he can make. And so from a sales point of view, if you can show him how he can then hold that water in there, then he'll be very interested. This is just a slide that I did for a customer of ours, just to show them the ways and means of actually holding in that water and improving your purge and your cook yield. And of course for you guys, the end slide where it has the Citri-Fi is the main thing. So you can do it with increasing your pH, but then you've got issues with shelf life. You can do it with using salts, cheap, easy, but then the issue is obviously your taste. And then you come to the functional ingredients, which is obviously your fibre, which is Citri-Fi, and starches and carrageenans fall into that category. The only concern there is obviously your labelling and your cost situation, but once the customer understands the benefits of that, then you can push forward through to him the use and why you will need to use these functional ingredients such as Citri-Fi. Unfortunately, I don't think this is in the thing, but I can certainly send it to you. This is just to, I know it's an awful lot of information to take in, but basically what I'm trying to show here is that with using the Citri-Fi 140, and the difference, I'm not sure if you know, but the M40 stands for a very fine grade, which often but yeah, it's mainly it's injectable. So what I've done here is, as you can see, I've taken the phosphate out. The little arrow works here. Does it work? Okay, so I've taken out the phosphate, which is STPP, and I've used the Citri-Fi in conjunction with the carrageenan and the sodium citrate. The sodium citrate's there just to help the ions. So you want some more ions in the system, hence sodium citrate. And, okay, the interesting one to look at is here. So here, you've got a terrific cook yield, so you would, you go, it's got a lot of sodium thing. Alright, so you come here and you've got 86%. So you go to your processor and you go, I've got 86% yield for you, and he's going, terrific. Because normally, on a normal salt and phosphate system, I'm only getting 75. So that's 11% in the bank for me. Terrific. And it's only cost, and hence the gross profit per unit has just gone up. So he'll think, that's great, let's go for it. But the only problem is the texture. You've got to come back to the flavour issue. So the work that we did, which has now been accepted by one customer, is this one here, where we used a bit of carrageenan for cook yield. You need the carrageenan for that. The Citri-Fi was in there to stop the purge, and your cook yield was quite high, and you got beautiful succulence and taste profile. So what you can take from this is, yes, you can over-engineer a product so that you get great results and you look fantastic to the customer, but if it's not going to taste any good, it's not going to sell an awful lot. So you have to find that middle ground, and it's all about trade-offs. So, now we get to this. So hence the cook yield. And again, here's your salt, Citri-Fi and carrageenan, and here it is with other salts put in there. But from a flavour point, of view, this was the preferred one. So even though you didn't get quite as good cook yield, this was the better flavoured. And then from your gross profit per unit, this one came out pretty close to the salt one from back there. So for your customer's point of view, this would be the favourite one to go with.